Tommy sat alone in the darkness of his bedroom, the glow of his laptop screen casting an eerie light across his face. He was scrolling through Netflix, searching for his next horror fix. He had always been fascinated by the thrill of fear, the rush of adrenaline that came with watching something scary. It was a guilty pleasure that he couldn't resist. Finally, he found a movie that looked promising. It was a low-budget production with a cheesy title, but the trailer had hooked him. He hit play and settled back into his chair, the only sound in the room the faint hum of his laptop. As the movie unfolded on the screen, Tommy felt his pulse quicken. The story was about a family that moved into a haunted house, and as they explored their new home, they uncovered the grisly history of the previous occupants. The tension built steadily as the family began to experience strange and terrifying events, culminating in a final showdown with the malevolent spirit that haunted them. Tommy was engrossed in the story, completely immersed in the world of the movie. But as the night wore on, he began to notice that something was off. He felt a chill run down his spine, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He tried to brush it off as just his imagination, but the feeling persisted. Suddenly, he heard a creaking sound from down the hallway. It was a small noise, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make him jump. He paused the movie and listened, his heart racing. He was alone in the house, or so he thought. Could it be an intruder, or was it something more sinister? Tommy took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. It was just his imagination, he told himself. There was nothing to be afraid of. But as he pressed play and the movie resumed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Tommy tried to focus on the movie, but his nerves were on edge. Every sound in the house made him jump, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move and shift in the flickering light. He was convinced that something was in the house with him, something malevolent and dangerous. As the movie reached its climax, Tommy heard a loud bang from downstairs. It sounded like someone had slammed a door shut. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Was someone really in the house with him? He tried to call out, but his throat felt tight, and his voice came out as a croak. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. Tommy gasped, scrambling for his phone to use as a flashlight. As he shone it around the room, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. Something was moving in the shadows. He felt a cold breath on the back of his neck, and he spun around, his phone held aloft. But there was nothing there, just the empty darkness of his room. He was alone. Or was he? Tommy tried to control his breathing, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get out of the house, had to escape whatever was lurking in the shadows. But as he stood up, he heard a whisper in his ear, a voice that chilled him to the bone. "You can't leave," it said. "You're mine now." Tommy stumbled backwards, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been so scared in his life. The voice had sounded so real, so close, but there was no one in the room with him. He tried to think logically. Maybe it was just his imagination, his fear playing tricks on him. But as he turned towards the door, it slammed shut with a force that made the walls shake. Tommy was trapped. He tried to run towards the window, but something grabbed his ankle, and he fell to the ground with a cry. He kicked out, trying to free himself, but the grip only tightened. As he looked down, he saw a bony hand wrapped around his ankle, the skin stretched tight over the bones. Tommy's stomach turned, and he tried to pull himself away, but it was like the hand was glued to him. And then he saw the face. It was pale and gaunt, with sunken eyes and a twisted mouth. It grinned at him, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Tommy screamed, but no sound came out. The creature began to pull him towards the closet, and Tommy clawed at the floor, trying to resist. But it was like the creature was made of iron, and no matter how hard he struggled, it didn't budge. Tommy closed his eyes, praying that it was all just a nightmare, but when he opened them again, he was inside the closet, surrounded by darkness. The door was closed, and he was alone with the creature that had dragged him there. Tommy's eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness of the closet, and he could make out the shape of the creature standing in front of him. It was tall and skeletal, with long, thin limbs and a head that seemed too big for its body. He tried to scream again, but his throat was dry and scratchy. The creature took a step closer, and Tommy could see its eyes glittering in the darkness. Who are you?" he managed to croak out. The creature didn't answer, but its mouth twisted into a cruel smile. Tommy tried to back away, but he was pressed up against the back wall of the closet, with nowhere to go. He could hear the creature breathing now, a low, rattling sound that seemed to come from deep within its chest. And then it spoke, in a voice that sounded like it was made of bones scraping against each other. "You watched me on your screen," it said. "Now I watch you." Tommy's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The creature was real, and it had come from the horror movie he had watched earlier that night. He closed his eyes, trying to make sense of it all. Was he dreaming? Was he hallucinating? But the cold, hard touch of the creature's fingers on his skin told him that this was all too real. Tommy's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out of the closet. He couldn't stay there forever, but he didn't know how to escape the creature's grasp. Suddenly, he remembered something he had seen in a horror movie. The hero had used a crucifix to ward off the evil creature. Tommy didn't have a crucifix, but he did have a cross necklace that his grandma had given him. He reached up to his neck, feeling for the small silver cross. It was still there. With shaking hands, he pulled it out from under his shirt and held it up in front of him. The creature hissed and recoiled, its eyes flashing with anger. Tommy could feel the tension in the air, and he knew that this was his chance to make a break for it. He scrambled to his feet and ran past the creature, out of the closet and down the hall. He didn't look back, but he could hear the creature's footsteps behind him. He burst through the door to his bedroom and slammed it shut behind him. He didn't know what to do next, but he knew that he had to stay alive. He looked around frantically, searching for something to defend himself with. And then he saw it. His dad's hunting rifle mounted on the wall above his bed. He had never fired a gun before, but he knew that it was his only chance. He took a deep breath, aimed the rifle, and fired. There was a loud bang, and then silence. Tommy cautiously approached the bed and saw that the creature was lying on the floor, motionless. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted and relieved. The nightmare was over, but Tommy knew that he would never forget what had happened that night.